Hello again, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this Sunday, May 8th edition of Alaska Weather. I'm David Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show once again. And up first, we've got, hazardous weather graphic around Fort Yukon there. That's a flood watch that's out through Monday evening, and it's for the upper Yukon, or for the Yukon Flats and surrounding uplands, and that's a flood watch for possible ice jam flooding in that area, again out through Monday evening. And then down in the yellow area there, that's a winter weather advisory, which is out for Denali from about Healy west, and and that's out through Monday night, so it kicks into effect 10 p.m. tonight and then stays out through Monday, and Monday night ends at 6 a.m. Tuesday. And looking for 3 to 6 inches of snow to fall from Healy westward and across the Denali Park area, with locally amounts as high as 10 inches of snow. And from there, moving on to satellite imagery, you can see bands of clouds moving into the interior. One there pushing across the Yukon Flats, is passing over the Fairbanks area. Very light, scattered precipitation with that, to none at all. Just mid and high level clouds coming across the area south of the Alaska Range, or south central Alaska. Just some mid and high level clouds, very variable, but still mostly sunny day for the Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula, and the valleys, Manuska and Susitna, as well as the Copper River Basin. Same thing for Kodiak Island, just some variable high clouds coming across, but the more stronger system back to the west, low pressure, heavier band of clouds, not really bringing heavy precipitation in, but gusty winds and the precipitation falling as snow. Kivalina, Nome, and Kotzebue picked up 1 to 3 inches of snow today. Temperatures at mid-afternoon in the about 34 degrees at all three locations there, and about an inch of snow fell at Ambler and Caltag, with also temperatures low to mid-30s there, but turns to rain farther to the south and locally to the east there, especially as the afternoon wears on. Bethel carrying some light rain. They had a few hundredths of an inch today, but they had winds gusting to 40 miles an hour as that front approached. And pretty windy conditions up to the north were associated with a low pressure area as it tracks eastward toward the north coast of the Seward Peninsula. Nome had gusts to 30 miles an hour, Buckland 32 miles an hour out of the southeast, St. Mary's close to 40 miles an hour, as did Bethel, and St. Michael 43 mile an hour wind gusts. So pretty good system that came out of the Russian Far East there, tracking east across the northern Bering Sea, or actually the Bering Strait. And you can see once again the mostly clear skies over the Panhandle today, a lot of sunshine, Juneau, and I believe Gustavus up into the lower 60s today, 50s most everywhere else down there. So very nice conditions there, as well as eastern Aleutian, sunshine on Alaska and Nikolsky, with the just that weak front dropping down toward the Pribilofs, that weak trailing edge there, probably bring a few showers at best to the St. Paul, St. George area when that passes through. And on the chart today, you can see that 995 millibar low that's tracking towards Shishmaref at mid-afternoon today, with the snow to the Seward Peninsula, St. Lawrence Island, up into the northwest interior, Kobuk Valley, Kotzebue, as I mentioned, and it mixes with rain down along the frontal boundary, especially later in the afternoon hours, lower elevations falling as rain, but light rain, not all that heavy precipitation amounts, water equivalent anywhere from a few hundredths to maybe 1 to 2/10 of an inch if you melt it down. And for tonight, kind of splits off. A breakaway low there develops and moves eastward with the cold front to the western Copper River Basin tonight, with the Talkeetna Mountains. That's late tonight, say around 3-4 a.m. And then the other low center drifts eastward along the north-central north slopes. Look for a widespread area of snow, 1 to 3 inches of snow falling across much of the western central interior, pushing into the western Alaska Range, northern Kuskokwim Valley. More showery southern Kuskokwim Valley and the Kuskokwim Delta, rain and snow showers be very light with that front as it pushes across Bristol Bay. And then late tonight, increasing chance of some shower activity for mainly the west side, Shelikof Strait side of Kodiak Island. Westerly flow should keep it dry there for Kodiak State Airport there and the Coast Guard Support Center. Otherwise, Panhandle stays fair. High pressure building over the Bering Sea and the Aleutians makes for very light variable wind conditions there tonight. And a little breezier up towards St. Lawrence Island, but not too bad at all. And then for the day tomorrow, high pressure really dominating the Bering Sea into the Bering Strait. Now light winds, clearing, sunshine possible anywhere at times, especially along the Aleutians. And rain and snow showers in a decreasing mode there for the Alaska Peninsula. Now pretty good low tracks to northeast Prince William Sound tomorrow afternoon. And that's going to make for at least some moisture chances even into Cook Inlet and the Kenai Peninsula. Better chance of rain and snow Copper River Basin up into the central eastern interior areas. And again, the winter weather advisory in the Denali area for 3 to 6 inches of snow by Tuesday morning. Shower chances increase on the north coast of the Panhandle, but stays partly mostly sunny down to the south. Temperatures 50s to lower 60s again. And definitely cooler over the central interior. That front pulling colder air southward, so pretty chilly highs for tomorrow over much of interior Alaska for what you'd normally expect for the 9th of May. Periods of snow on the Arctic coast, light snow, maybe some accumulations there, but nothing more than an inch or two at the best. And then for Tuesday, another system moves out of the Russian Far East with a low up over the Arctic, actually near Wrangel Island, and the frontal system will spread another round of snow and gusty winds from St. Lawrence Island, especially the Seward Peninsula up along the northwest coast, Noatak Valley to the western Arctic coast. High pressure builds into the interior, dries it out. It'll be partly to mostly sunny, but temperatures quite chilly for the 10th of May. And clears back out. Kodiak Island, a lot of sunshine expected. Bristol Bay into the Kenai Peninsula. Rain and snow showers continue over toward the eastern interior. And now rain moves into the Panhandle, that low center and frontal boundary moving to just off the coast. Lows tonight, 20s, upper teens to mid-20s for the North Slope and Arctic coast. Otherwise, 30 to 35 for the interior areas. Upper 20s for the Seward Peninsula. Lower 20s for Shishmaref. Mid-20s St. Lawrence Island, near freezing there for Kotzebue. And 35, mainly in the 30s for the southern Alaska. Lower 40s, some areas of the Panhandle. Highs tomorrow, again, 55 to 62. Warmest in the southern Panhandle. That'll be the warmest area of the state tomorrow. Highs 40s to near 50 south central Alaska, 40 to 45 in the central interior, and near or below freezing from the Brooks Range out to the Arctic coast. And then the lows Tuesday morning, 15 to 20, colder temperatures now. Shishmaref forecast low at 16 and 15 for Anatuvik Pass. Otherwise 25 to 30 in the central interior, so a hard freeze. Coming into the interior valleys of the state with upper 20s down to the southwest coast, 30 to 35 or upper 20s to lower 30s for south central Alaska, Copper River Basin. Highs on Tuesday, mostly in the 40s, lower to mid in the north, mid-20s for the Arctic coast and North Slope.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Flying weather, IFR, Monday morning, Arctic coast across all of the western interior. But marginal VFR, the southwest part of the state, there out to the Bering Sea coast, and marginal VFR for the Pribilofs and southern Bering Sea to the Alaska Peninsula. VFR, Kenai Peninsula, Cook Inlet, Kodiak Island, and Unalaska, Nikolsky, Adak, and Atka, all in the VFR zone, as well as the Copper River Basin and the Panhandle, with good IFR into the central interior, Tanana Valley, and along the southern slopes of the Brooks Range. And for the afternoon, IFR through the central part of the state down into the northern Kuskokwim Valley, but staying west or along and to the west of the western Alaska Range. Still VFR, Cook Inlet into the Susitna Valley, with marginal VFR, Prince William Sound, Turnagain Arm into the Chugach and Talkeetna mountain areas, and most of the Copper River Basin. And now marginal VFR pushing to the north coast of the Panhandle, and VFR, northern Bering Sea, St. Lawrence Island, Norton Sound, down along the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta to Togiak Bay and Bristol Bay. and the Western Central Aleutians VFR. Some marginal VFR there across the southern Bering Sea down to the Fox Islands and Alaska Peninsula. And for Tuesday morning, really improving out over the Bering Sea, just a couple of bands of marginal VFR out there, otherwise VFR for the Aleutians. Most of the western part of the state, Alaska Peninsula, Bristol Bay, and Kodiak Island, right on up into Cook Inlet, Kachemak Bay, and Prince William Sound. Manuscus is sitting in the valley, Talkeetna Mountains there. And central eastern Copper River Basin still marginal. That extends down across the Panhandle. Some IFR up over the Tanana Valley and banked up along the Alaska Range. Marginal VFR northward to the Yukon River. And then IFR, eastern Arctic coast and North Slope areas. And for Tuesday afternoon, area of IFR shifts eastward to the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, improving back to the west. Another batch of IFR coming eastward there and pushing into the Seward Peninsula, and from roughly near Kivalina up to Point Hope, Cape Lisburne to Point Lay. VFR, central interior, marginal VFR banked up along the Alaska Range, and that extends across most of the Tanana Valley and the eastern interior. And Panhandle, marginal VFR now to the eastern North Gulf Coast, southern Alaska VFR, Kodiak, southern Bering Sea and Aleutians VFR. Anaktuvik, IFR for tomorrow, and Adigan, IFR as well. IFR flying conditions, especially on the western entrances of both Lake Clark and Merrill passes, and a little bit better conditions on the eastern entrance of Lake Clark, Merrill, and Rainy, but looks like IFR definitely for the western approaches of those passes. Windy, mostly IFR. Isabel, IFR, and Mentasta, kick it up to marginal VFR there. Portage, Tanita, marginal VFR, but Portage as well will be marginal most of the day tomorrow on Monday. And for Chilkoot and White, VFR, but trending toward marginal possibly in the afternoon, but that moisture not quite sliding in as that fast. So looking at another VFR day for those two passes. Freezing levels, 2 to 8,000 feet, kind of oriented northwest to southeast there across the Bering Sea into the Alaska Peninsula. As that cold air aloft pushes south and southeast, or southeastward mostly, 2,000 feet covering much of interior Alaska or less, and about 4,000 over the Panhandle. Icing, areas of isolated moderate rime or mixed icing, mostly covering the entire interior of the state, with the main band pushing into the eastern North Gulf Coast, trying to get into the Panhandle there. And as far as the jet stream goes, upper trough, northwest winds, north and northwest winds, 110 to 100 or 100 to 120 knots there, taking them over in west-northwest direction there, just south of Kodiak Island. And at 9,000 feet, high pressure building over the western Bering Sea and cold upper low over the eastern and central interior. So those northerly winds pulling the cold air southward across the eastern Bering and western interior, right across Kodiak Island up to 55 knots, and then west-southwest 35 knots there, right around Yakutat, but lighter over the northern Panhandle. 3,000 feet, northwest-northwest 50 knots, Kamishak Bay and the Barren Island areas, clipping southern Cook Inlet. 40 knots out of the north for the Seward Peninsula, but light with high pressure out over the Bering Sea. Turbulence, considerable moderate chop, Kodiak Island, southern Cook Inlet, the Aleutian Range, Togiak Bay up into the western and southwest interior, smooth to the north and east.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, and joining me once again is Eric Stevens from the Geographic Information Network of Alaska, or GINA, based at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Eric, welcome back to the show.
Well, Dave, it's great to be back. Thanks for inviting us again.
Sure thing. And today we want to talk about identifying burn scars. That would be the burned up area after a wildfire when the flames and the smoke are gone. We can see it if you drive by it on the roadway, of course, but from satellite, we can also identify those places on the land, right?
You know it. You know that expression, ouch, that's going to leave a mark?
Yeah.
After you bang your knee getting out of the car.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the ouch, it's going to leave a mark, that also applies to the landscape. Whenever a wildfire ravages through, it's going to leave a mark on the landscape. After a wildfire burns out, this is called a burn scar.
Okay.
And you can ask yourself, well, that's interesting. We can see a burn scar from space. Right. Then the question is, well, why does that matter?
Okay.
Who cares?
Yeah, fire's over.
Right, the fire is over. We don't need to worry about this anymore. It turns out you kind of do, because burn scars are important. There's this old rule of thumb in the weather business that flood follows fire. The action of the fire in killing off the vegetation, in baking, kiln drying the landscape a little bit, can hinder the land's ability to absorb rainfall. So if you have a fire, especially if it's in complex mountainous terrain. This is classic in California. It can happen somewhat in Alaska too. You get a wildfire in steep, hilly, or mountainous terrain, rips off all the vegetation off the landscape. Then 6 months later, there's a big rainstorm, and you get a flash flood in that area. So flood can follow fire. That's why you got to know where the burn scars are. Secondly, a fire needs fuel to maintain itself. So if there's an old burn scar left over from a year or two ago, and then another summer later here in Alaska in the interior, it's a big wildfire season. If there's a fire advancing toward an old burn scar, well, guess what? That old burn scar can be tougher terrain for that new fire to get through, because there's not as much fuel in that burn scar. So they almost act like a natural fire break. These are a couple of reasons why you need to know where those burn scars are. Alaska Fire Service has limited resources. They want to put their people and their equipment where it does the most good. They need to know, well, this is an area where there's no burn scar. We better put people here because that fire could really run.
So really important for weather forecasters and fire weather forecasters for sure.
Oh yeah.
But then how do weather satellites actually detect those burn scars?
Good question.
Thanks.
Well, let's turn the Wayback Machine to the summer of 2015. That was a very active year. We've got a picture here taken up in the White Mountains. This is one of the fires in progress that summer, and if you look real close, you can almost see Frodo throwing the ring into the volcano there. So that's quite the vision. Well, let's look at a visible image. Here we are in Alaska's interior. This is before the fires got out of the cage in early summer of 2015. Let's zoom into the western interior here. Again, this is a weather satellite image of visible light, what the human eye can see. We're into the middle reach of the Yukon Valley there in the western interior, Galena area. And this is just a beautiful visible day. Nothing much going on. It's in early June before the fires really got active. But then in 2015, the fires got loose, especially in that western interior. Here's another image. The same satellite pass as that visible image, but now we're not quite looking at visible light.
Very different.
There's a slight change here. This image incorporates something called the veggie band. 0.86 micron wavelength. The micron's very tiny, but that wavelength responds to vegetation, the chlorophyll. So trees and grasses reflect that part of the electromagnetic spectrum back to the satellite. And so the satellite sees that. When signal comes at that wavelength to the satellite, we know, there's some vegetation growing there. This is great. You can identify coastlines so easily because you go from vegetation to water. Turns out if you have a burn scar, guess what? You burned away the vegetation, so that's going to show up. We're going to do a before, during, and after kind of look here. And so we're looking at before. So in this image, we got a lot of green out there. That's wonderful. Another fun thing about this kind of imagery is you can see down in the Alaska Range in the southeast corner of the image, it's blue. That's glaciers and snow in the mountains. So this is not really what the human eye can see. This is these wavelengths are beyond human vision, but we've made them look certain colors. So the vegetation looks green. Now let's look at that same kind of satellite recipe, but during the fires. This is in July. The fires are loose. You can see the smoke in the middle of the image, the smearing look of the smoke, and then we can see some clouds that are white. Icy clouds are blue. So this is in July of 2015. The fires are doing their thing. We're burning up millions of acres. Now let's go to September. The fires are out. The audience has left the theater. You know, the event's over, right? We're done. But guess what? Now look at those brown patches.
Look at that.
All of those places are where the fire has burned away the vegetation. So you can see where the fires were. You can add up these perimeters, get acreage burned and such. And so that's good to know. Now remember, flood follows fire, and these are also natural fire breaks. So you need to know where these guys are. In the course of the 2015 summer season, we went from before with not much burn scar in this area to just a couple months later, we can see so much burn scarring on the landscape. What's interesting too about the satellite and looking at burn scars is you realize that burn scars are the gift that keeps on giving. You can forget that a couple of years ago maybe there was a fire in a certain area, but the satellite won't forget. So in the summertime we get wildfires in Alaska, but guess what? In the visible imagery here we can see the burn scars just a little bit, but they're not as prominent as in that veggie band. But then you can't see them at all if you cover them up with snow, right?
Exactly.
So here's an image from the middle of the winter time.
Wow.
And snow on the ground by this recipe looks blue. Again, these are wavelengths of light that the human eye can't really see. We're getting up into the infrared, near infrared. And the way we've assigned colors is if there's snow on the ground or there's a glacier, it looks blue, kind of intuitive. So this is early April of the following year, 2016.
Okay.
We're just about to get into breakup. We've got a lot of snow on the ground, and now it's all going to melt. And as the snow melts, then you get our final image here. Doesn't this look familiar? This looks like a lot of what we saw in September of the previous summer. So this is the spring of the next year. The fires themselves might not have overwintered, they're gone, but the fire scar does. And as the snow melts away, and then you have breakup, and then you have green up, whenever the leaves come out, the grass comes back, except in the burned areas, they're having a tough time because everything got burned off the previous year. So you can see these scars even the next summer, multiple years. It depends on what kind of vegetation there is. You know, some of the tussocky tundra grasses, they'll grow back really quick, but to get a forest to come back, that'll take much longer. So these burn scars, eventually the landscape will fill in the burn scar. It will heal itself, if you want to use that metaphor. But for the next few years, you can still keep track of these on satellite. And again, the reason we want to do that is that the burn scar can facilitate a flood, and it can act like a fire break. So there you are, the veggie band.
tools. So if you're a weather satellite and you're looking at my bowl of vegetables here, you might be able to pick out which one's the pea, which one's the tomato, and which one's the carrot, and apply that information precisely to whatever it is you're working on there. That is really fascinating stuff, that we have that capability from so high above the planet Earth, and Alaska for that matter.
Yep,
Eric?
eat your veggies.
Yes, definitely. I think I will. I'm hungry. Thanks so much for joining us again, Eric, and thank you for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. We'll see you right here next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at marine forecasts here for the southeast coast. Small craft advisories for Monday on the south coast. Northwest winds 25 knots. Lighter, more westerly winds on the north coast, west at 20 knots, and south winds 10 knots, Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay. Otherwise, the central and southern inner channels looking at a northwest breeze at 10 knots, seas 2 feet. And for the day Tuesday, southwest winds 15 knots with 8-foot seas on the south coast. And the north coast, east to south winds 15 to 20 knots. Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay, south winds 15 knots. Stevens Passage, south winds at 10, and southeast winds 15 knots for Clarence Strait. Prince William Sound, small craft advisories tomorrow for northwest winds at 25 knots, seas at about 4 feet. Gale warnings for the North Gulf Coast, west winds 35 knots, seas 12 feet. Gale warnings also for the Barren Islands and Kamishak Bay, west winds 35 knots, so quite a fetch of gales there, and seas 12 to 14 feet. Small craft advisory, Southern Cook Inlet, westerly winds at 30 knots with 10-foot seas, but north of the Forelands, southwest at 15. Tuesday, north winds 20 knots for Northern Cook Inlet, with seas up to 6 feet, northwest 20 knots, south of the Forelands with 6-foot seas. Gale warnings continue for Kamishak Bay and the Barren Islands for 35-knot northwest winds, 25-knot northwest winds western North Gulf Coast, and for Prince William Sound and the eastern North Gulf Coast, winds will be northwest at 20 knots. Kodiak Island for Monday, west winds 30 knots, seas 9 feet. Alaska Peninsula, west winds 20 knots, seas 8 feet. Small craft advisories for Bristol Bay, west winds 25 knots, seas at 8 feet. And for Tuesday, Kodiak Island, northwest winds 25 to 30 knots. The Alaska Peninsula, northwest winds 20 knots with 6-foot seas. And Bristol Bay looking at a northwest wind at 20 knots with seas at 5 feet. And then gale warnings from Castle Cape to Sitkinak, northwest 35 knots. On Alaska Island tomorrow, variable winds at 10 knots. Unimak Island, northeast 15 to 20 knots. And Adak and Atka, northeast winds 15 to 25 knots, 4 to 9-foot seas there. On Chitka Island, northeast winds at 20. And then from Kiska to Shemya, winds will be south at 15. On Tuesday, for the Fox Islands, east to northeast winds 20 to 25 knots, seas running 4 to 8 feet. Adak and Atka, northeast and east-northeast, 20 to 30 knots. Amchit Island, east at 25. Kiskadashimia, east at 20. Pribilofs, Monday, northwest winds 10 knots, but seas up to 7 feet. West 20-knot winds in the forecast for the Kuskokwim Delta coast with 8-foot seas. Otherwise, small craft advisories for the Yukon Delta coast. West winds 25 knots. Small craft advisories also for St. Lawrence Island and Norton Sound for northwest winds at 25 knots. And for Tuesday, St. Matthew Island, southwest winds 20 knots, seas 6 feet. Light variable wind conditions for the Pribilof Islands under high pressure. Variable at 10 with 3-foot seas. And for the Yukon Delta coast, winds will be west at 20 knots. Southwest winds 15 to 20 knots, Norton Sound, St. Lawrence Island, Kuskokwim Delta coast, northwest winds at 20 knots. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast for Monday, winds will be out of the east at 15 knots, turn northeast 15 on the central coast, and then increase from the northwest on the western Arctic coast there at 20 knots. Brisk wind advisories from Cape Beaufort to Wales for 25-knot northwest winds, and also brisk wind advisories for 30-knot northwest winds from Cape Thompson to Wales. And then for Tuesday, Wales to Cape Thompson, south winds 20 knots. Brisk wind advisory still in that area there from Cape Thompson to Cape Beaufort. And the western Arctic coast, south winds 20 knots. West 15 to 20 knot winds for the central and eastern Beaufort Sea coast. For tonight, a couple of low centers. One kind of drifts eastward there over the north slope. Another one moves to the western Copper River Basin late tonight with the cold front bringing cold air southward. Snow across much of interior Alaska, a little mixed with rain for the northeast interior there, Yukon Flats, but snow in the Copper River Basin. Moisture having a tough time jumping the Alaska Range into the Susitna Valley and Cook Inlet, but look for some shower activity to push into Kodiak. And then snow starts to taper off, dries out over the northern Bering Sea, and the Bering Sea storm-free with high pressure and light winds. That continues into Monday. Low pressure tracks along the eastern North Gulf Coast with a cold front now south of Kodiak Island. Rain and snow showers over much of the central and southern interior. The areas of snow from the northern valleys out to the Arctic coast. A little drier over on Tuesday.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.